You only have to take a quick look at the Football Manager social media to see they've barely tweeted since announcing the original delay, never mind cancellation, of FM25. And when you add that on to the ever-increasing pile of things that we complain about every year, the same things every time, why are press conferences so awful and still with the same responses they had when the feature was first introduced, 20 years ago? It becomes easy to start asking the question, do they even know at Sports Interactive that we exist? Do they pay any attention to what we're saying, what we're thinking? And when you do start to combine that lack of communication coming our way with the way they've seemingly ignored so many feature requests over the years, start to question, is it just that they're bad at communicating, or are they maybe just not listening to us at all? So in this video, I'm going to be exploring why it feels like Sports Interactive are just not listening to us. And if you've got your own thoughts on that issue, obviously get down into the comments section and let me know all about them, or maybe jump into the Discord. The link to that is down in the description too. And of course, if you are new, subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on. And you know what? Why not go for the full set and leave a like while you're down there as well? Let's crack on, shall we? Because I feel like it's important for us to frame the problem, because I'm not just talking about the fact that we've been ignored for the last 6 months, 12 months, however long it's been since they went on their kind of self-imposed social media blackout. Ironically, just a few months after they told us all about how they were going to be entering a period of more transparency. That hasn't really worked out, has it? But Sports Interactive have been around for over 30 years, going back through Football Manager, Championship Manager. And over those 30 years or so, it's fair to say, especially when comparing consecutive releases, that all those games do feel very familiar. Obviously, if you compare Championship Manager 2 to Football Manager 22, you notice more of a difference, but those kind of year-on-year iterations, one of the most common pieces of feedback that you get at release time every year is it just feels like they've re-released last year's game. Nothing really changes from game to game. But despite that, certainly in recent years, they have built up an absolutely enormous player base. Certainly having everybody locked in their houses for a year, whilst they made the brilliant marketing decision to give the game away for free during that period, helped and led to a big boost. But obviously they were on an upward trajectory anyway, with FM24 now having hit over 15 million players as per the most recent count. I remember when they used to get excited for hitting 1 million players, and that wasn't so long ago. So the game is growing exponentially. They're adding licenses. We've had the Champions League in the last couple of years. They've announced but not yet implemented the Premier League license. Women's football is obviously being added in the new version of the game, and we're getting that graphical overhaul. But despite all of that growth and all of that change, there are a number of key common requests from the user base that feel like they've been ignored for like 20 years, with no real plans to do anything about them even now, at least that we're aware of, which is part of the problem in itself. So in this video, I'm going to be giving a little bit of a summary of what I think the community is looking for from a Football Manager game, compare that to what Sports Interactive are actually doing, and try and work out whether we are actually being ignored or if we're just maybe being a little bit impatient. Because I've accumulated a little bit of a list of some of the most common feature requests from the community that have gone untouched for years and years and years. And the first one I have already touched on very briefly, but better press conferences. I don't think we're asking for too much when we ask for better press conferences. This feature was added to the game before most of you were born, and for the entirety of that time, the questions have remained unchanged. The answers have remained unchanged. You know the shape of a press conference or a media interaction or a job interview or a player interaction, to the point where I think for most of us, we can navigate these on muscle memory. We know where to click on the screen and we don't have to read it because we know what it says. And it does make you wonder, if no one's actually reading it, if everybody is just clicking in the order that they click because they know it's the right answer, why bother even having it in the game? And in fact, Sports Interactive mentioned it themselves in their dev diary. Remember when they had a dev diary when they were still talking to us about FM25 and they did that big list of things that they were cutting? This was one that was mentioned because based on their own research, people were spending less than a second per question. And I don't think that indicates that people don't want to do media, don't want to do press conferences. I think that indicates that we've all done them so many times. We know what the questions are. We don't need to read them out loud every time when they're always the same. And in this world of AI and fancy pants stuff like that, I don't think it's that complicated to implement some alternative questions. Have some dynamically generated ones, maybe, within parameters. Obviously, you don't want it to get weird, but I don't see that it could be that difficult to code an actual living, breathing media, player interaction, press conference system. But it doesn't seem like it's part of the plan, certainly not any plan that they've mentioned anywhere ever. And then, of course, we've got online in general for Football Manager. It's 2025 and this game is still the clunkiest online game ever. And the procedure, the process for it hasn't changed forever. There's no dedicated servers. You're relying on the strength of the internet connection of your host, and they're basically connecting as if it was a local co-op game. Network games become unmanageable if you have more than a couple of players playing them, or if any of those players are incredibly slow playing Americans who ruin it for everybody. The guys who ran the Streamer Showdown performed absolute miracles, being able to actually get 9 people in a game at one time. And even then, they had to completely build their own database to be able to do it. And even then, it would still break occasionally because the game isn't built for having as many as 8, 9 people playing at the same time. I've got a handheld console that just arrived the other day that can have 24 people playing Mario Kart on it online at the same time. The fact that Football Manager struggles on a PC with 8 players is ridiculous. And obviously, as they do look to push out more into console, online, co-op, competitive play, that's a huge part of the console gaming experience. And if they don't get it right, the game risks being left behind. And they had a little bit of a half-hearted go at it a few years ago with that versus mode that they hid within FMFC. But they didn't really make much of a song and dance about it. I've still never played it because it's not ranked. It's just randomly matching you up against somebody else. And that somebody else can just bring in their edited team of 200 current ability players. And it doesn't make for a good online experience, I don't think. Why we can't, again, in 2025, just jump into an online competitive Champions League that you could play through in an evening, just Champions League. Get your 36 teams in and just play through a Champions League. You don't have to worry about the rest of the season. Just take that out and do it separately. You could do the same with the World Cup, the Euros, the Premier League. Just pull it out and have it as a game mode. I should be able to go onto my Discord and say, I'm hosting a Football Manager tournament tonight. Here's the link. Jump in, 64 people, knockout tournament. It's going to be awesome. And it's just not manageable. It's not workable. We can't do it. And that seems mad. And then I touched on this bit a little bit when I was talking about press conferences, but player personalities and events in game is just broken. We don't have players acting like real people. We have them acting like weird robots that have their weird preset behaviors. If a player is under 18 years old, it doesn't matter who they are, who they play for, who you are, who you manage, they're not going to join you. They could be at Macclesfield and you can be Real Madrid, but they'd rather continue their development at their current club. Likewise, if they've signed a contract in the last 6 months, there is no discussing a contract with them. It's not an option. Only got 2 goalkeepers in your squad? I'm afraid the rest of the squad are going to absolutely riot about it. And even if the third choice one you bring in isn't really good enough, but he's just there to sit on the bench when one of the others is injured, doesn't matter. They need a new first choice goalkeeper because you got to have 3 first team ready goalkeepers in any squad. Even if you're managing in the Conference North, you kind of got to have 3 first team ready goalkeepers, obviously, just like real life teams. But it's not just the players. The managers are bonkers as well. How many times have we spent years managing a team in a Let's Play only to move on to a different club and check back in a year later and see that the team we'd put together and won everything with has been completely dismantled by the AI and replaced with a bunch of absolute jokers for no apparent reason? Why is it that a player that's going to cost me 200 million, the AI can buy for 50 million? Why do other managers not respond to my tactics? They just do their preset tactic regardless. There's so many of these little dynamic coding tweaks that could just make it feel less like you're passing down a corridor, having to make the correct decision and you already know what the correct decision is, and more real life decisions with consequences that maybe aren't obvious. I would love a playthrough of Football Manager where I experience some unintended consequences at some point. Just something like that would be amazing. But again, none of this stuff seems to be the things that Sports Interactive are currently, at least publicly, working on. But it's not fair to say they're ignoring us completely, even though the list of things we'd love to see change is a long one. There are things that had been on the list for a long time that they are publicly trying to fix. The big obvious one is the current rebuild that ultimately led to FM25 being cancelled in the first place. For years, we've asked for better graphics. Well, they're trying to deliver us better graphics. They're switching over to Unity. They're doing a new match engine. It's going to look better, play better, have better physics. It's going to have a better UI, a more consistent UI across platforms. These are things that have been asked for a long time. And I know there'll be the PC master race purists who are like, I don't want it to look like a console dashboard. Okay, but I get just as many messages from people saying, can I play it on my Steam Deck? Can't I have console controls in my Steam Deck? Well, you could, but even then the UI doesn't work. I played it on PlayStation and I don't understand how to do it on my phone or on my PC. Why is it so different? So just because they're not necessarily listening specifically to you doesn't mean they're not listening to users in general. And they clearly do a lot of studying of what features of the game people are using and what they don't, because they used it as their justification for removing things like fantasy draft and international management because people weren't doing them. They gave us the percentages in that development blog. But with all that being said, this change to Unity and this rebuild does seem to be all about being a focus on the tech side of things. They're focusing on things like the match engine, the user interface, the actual like code that underpins the whole thing. But these are all like polish. None of these are actually gameplay features. As much as they're nice to have and they look impressive on box art or in trailers, none of this stuff that they're actually working on is going to make the game more fun or more immersive to play. And that is quite alarming and doesn't seem to be something that's being addressed or talked about. Even in their own marketing, they talked about how FM25, before it was cancelled, was going to be their biggest technical and visual advancement in 2 decades, which is great. But as part of doing it, they also announced they were going to take out a number of gameplay features with nothing actually really announced to replace those. And I think it is fair to say as a studio, they probably are quite stretched. They are still ultimately a small studio. Yes, they've expanded a lot in recent years, but it's become apparent by the cancellation of FM25 that they did bite off more than they could chew. They can't do everything. And I guess certainly in the short term, their priority switches from new gameplay features and actively improving the experience to, at this point, I imagine the attitude within the studio is very much get the game out at all costs. But even with all that being said, it doesn't mean there's not things they could be doing that would help us feel less like we're being ignored. Because even just explaining that last 30 seconds would make some of us feel a little bit better, I think. If they just held up their hands and said, look, this is the situation, this is where we are, this is where we're trying to get to, that would be huge. And the fact that they're completely silent about it is more damaging than, I would argue, more damaging than some of the broken promises we had over last year. Because there is, and this is a touchy word because of how they used it in the FM25 marketing, but there isn't a clear roadmap. And I would like one. Now, let me clarify. I don't want a roadmap of feature announcements leading up to the release of the new game for a month. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm saying a roadmap. By roadmap, I want them to release a Marvel Cinematic Universe style 5-year projection graphic and put the next 5 games on it and tell us what they're aiming to achieve in each of them. Because if FM26 is still going to have stuff like international management and fantasy draft removed, I want to know when they're coming back. Are they aiming to get them back for 27, 28, 29? Is there a plan to sort out press conferences? If they came out with this big graphic and said, look, FM26, the priority is get the game out, get it working with the new graphics, with the new licenses, with the new game mode with women's football. And then 27, we're going to bring back all of the features we took out. 28, we're sorting press conferences. 29, we're going to have better player interactions. I think just knowing that now, knowing what they're aiming to get to, would make a lot of us feel a lot better about where they are currently. And I get their reasons for not wanting to do it. They don't want to put out a timeline like that and then not be able to hit it. But let's face it, they've been down that road already. I don't think there's any more damage you can do on that front. If they're transparent throughout the whole process, you can move things around on that timeline. They could do a quarterly update to us and say, actually, you know how we were planning on getting press conferences ready for FM28? It's hit a snag. It's probably not going to be until 29 now, but we are doing this on 28 instead because it's a smaller job. And just regularly move stuff around and let us know, because I guarantee that document exists within Sports Interactive and they just don't want to show it to us. There's no way they're developing blind. They are never going to convince me that at the moment that studio is only thinking about getting out FM26 and they haven't given a moment's thought to 27, 28, 29. They have a roadmap. They can just show us it. And if there are top secret features that they don't want us to know about, they could give them a secret code name or leave them out completely. And it just includes the stuff that makes sense to us. And they can be vague about the ones that are really far in the future. If they were to say 5 years time, there's going to be a training overhaul, that's enough information for 5 years out. Obviously, they're going to need to give us more of that as they get to within a year, 2 years, wherever it might be. They're going to have to go in a little bit more detail. But you can be really vague 5 years out. At least then we know training's not changing for 5 years. We can dedicate some time to maybe learning how to use it. And then on the flip side of that, they should have a proper feature tracker. The users should be able to submit features. And if a feature enters the game that came from user feedback originally, highlight it. Say, look, this was the original message we got. 4 years later, here it is as the new feature. Here, Mr. You gave us the idea, have a free copy of the game. Just show that there is that flow from listening to the community through to the game getting better. And again, it gives us that confidence that they are listening. Because at the moment, all we're getting from them is PR. They promised transparency. We've had none. We're just getting damage limitation, public relations management stuff. It doesn't feel like we're a community that they're at the head of. It feels like they're the big closed off company trying to find a way to make money out of us. And that's not a nice way for a community to feel, even if ultimately that's what they are. We know they're a company. We know they're trying to make a profit, but it doesn't have to feel like that all the time. So we've looked at what Sports Interactive should do. What about us as the community? What should we be doing? Should we be patient? Do we owe them more time? And I think to a point, yeah, we probably kind of do need to give them a little bit of breathing space, a little bit of a chance. FM26 is going to be the first game on the new match engine. We shouldn't go into that expecting it to be better than FM24. It's not going to be. If it works and builds that and lays that solid foundation that they can then build on over the next 5 years, I think that's probably enough for 26. The problem is if they put it out as a bare bones game that just works, but don't also give us the roadmap for the next 5 years, some of that connection, that solid foundation thing disappears. And it starts to become here's this game that we think is good enough. And lap it up, we'll see you in a year. And we're not going to tell you what you're getting in a year for 11 months. And I think that's a much tougher sell than here's this bare bones game. It works. We think the things we have improved are much better. And this is what we're going to look to improve next year. This is what we're going to look to improve the year after. Or even, here's your bare bones game now. By the way, in March, international football is going to be back. It's not quite ready for launch, but we're going to release it for free midway through the cycle. And then you'll have your fantasy draft back for next year's game, along with X, Y, and Z new features. And the year after, this is what we've got planned. And if they do present it to us like that, I think that is them buying some patience and some understanding from us as a community. And at that point, we do give them time. But they are running out of time. And I think we're all getting fed up of this lack of transparency, especially when they made such a big deal about they were going to be transparent and then they stopped. And that really is a kick in the nuts. So to summarize, I've tried, as ever in these videos, I've tried to give a balanced argument. And I guess as a summary, I think Sports Interactive probably are listening. They're just not talking. And as a player base, we feel like we're being ignored, not just because we're not getting every feature we're asking for. We don't expect to get every feature we're asking for, but it's the fact that our requests aren't even being acknowledged that is what makes us feel ignored. If they just came out and said, this is why we're not changing press conferences. Because there is a this is why, we just don't know what it is. And it might be that they're planning to do it in 3 years. They're working on it. They're planning to remove it completely. But I think just that acknowledgement of the complaint and this is why we're not doing it would go almost as far as fixing it in the first place would, because at least then it shows they're listening. But I've talked a lot in this video. Let's throw it over to you in the comment section. What's the one feature you've wanted in Football Manager for years that you would add as your dream feature for FM26? If we get enough good ones of these, it could spin off into a video of its own. And do you think FM26 will actually deliver the game we've all been waiting for? And if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for me. Subscribe to the channel for daily Football Manager videos. And thank you very much for watching.